There are very few superlatives that I can think of to describe the absolute butt whooping the San Antonio Spurs just put on the Minnesota Timberwolves in Game 6 of the Western Conference semifinals. The Spurs won 139-109. I think it was the first time I've ever seen the opposing superstar player in Anthony Edwards go to the Spurs bench with 8 minutes left in the game to dap up and say congratulations on advancing because the game was already over. That was such an impressive performance by this Spurs team, and they are headed for a Western Conference Finals against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I am begging and praying for the San Antonio Spurs to save the NBA from that terrible, awful to watch Oklahoma City Thunder team. This game was so interesting because we saw incredible performances from almost every Spurs player. And what makes this team so unique is the Spurs may have the best player on the planet. In fact, I'm about ready to declare it. But it does not all revolve around Victor Wembanyama because they have such elite talent on this roster. Stephon Castle tonight played like an absolute superstar. Dylan Harper, I'm not sure how much longer you can keep that man on the bench. And if the Spurs leave this series with one problem, it's how do we get Dylan Harper more playing time when we have De'Aaron Fox balling out like he did tonight and Stephon Castle playing at a superstar level. This team is loaded with talent. It's loaded with depth. And it will be the best team in the NBA for years to come. This Western Conference Finals we're looking at, Thunder, Spurs, are probably going to be the two best teams in the NBA for the next half decade. And I'm very excited for it because I'm really hoping that the Spurs are able to overcome the Thunder this year. The big question mark coming into the playoffs for the Spurs is, are they too young? Will they be able to withstand the challenges of the playoffs without the experience? Well, now we are 2 rounds in. They were able to go 6 games with both teams. Actually, I think it was 5 games against Trailblazers, but 6 games in round 2. They've been able to get playoff experience, and you can no longer really use that as a reason to think they can't beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. I don't want to spend too much time focusing on that at the beginning of the series. I want to start focusing on tonight's game and this series. We know what Victor Wembanyama represents on both the offensive and defensive end of the court. He's probably the greatest defensive player I've ever watched in my lifetime. And you look back and you immediately think of some of the greatest defensive players of all time. Hakeem Olajuwon, Bill Russell, Tim Duncan, players like that, Kevin Garnett, who come to mind as the best defensive players you've ever seen. What Wemby is able to do on the defensive end of the court is truly unbelievable. But the fact that this Spurs team is still able to score 139 points, making it the second time in the series they've been over 130, and the third time they've been over 125 against the 8th-ranked defense in the NBA in the regular season in the Minnesota Timberwolves. Unbelievable how great this offense is. And you brought in a player in De'Aaron Fox last season and thought him alongside Wemby would be a great pairing. Well, the steps that Stephon Castle has made are really the story of this Spurs season to me. Obviously, Wemby's jump, but if you're talking about secondary story, it is how impressive Stephon Castle is. And he's going to be probably an all-star all-star level player for the next 10 seasons. We know Wemby will be in the MVP discussion for, as long as he's able to stay healthy. De'Aaron Fox is an all-star level player, and you got the second pick in Dylan Harper, who comes off the bench and absolutely balls. They were winning this game by so much, they ended the game with Bismack Biyombo, Kelly Olynyk, and Mason Plumlee in the lineup at the same time. That's got to be one of the craziest lineups I've ever seen in my life. Those are 3 big men that don't see a lot of run in the modern NBA, but they were all on the court on the same time because this team was up by 30-something points in the fourth quarter and ultimately won by 30. They could have scored 150 in this game had they left their starters in. But the other thing you got to discuss is the fact that Julian Champagnie tonight gave you 18 points and was a plus 35 for the game, the best on the team. So you have these young guards, Harper, Castle, you have, De'Aaron Fox, all-star level guard, Victor Wembanyama, best player in the NBA, and you have guys like Julian Champagnie adding real contributions. I think Luke Cornett is the best backup center in the NBA. He's a winner. He's a great rim protector, good lob finisher, good rebounder. This team has everything to go into Oklahoma City and find a way to win that series. And you saw what the Timberwolves were able to do against the Denver Nuggets with a limited Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards played real minutes in this series against the Timberwolves, and they put a smackdown on that team. And I will briefly touch on the Timberwolves at the end of this video because I think they're worlds away from being able to compete with the Thunder and the Spurs. I think the fact that they made the Western Conference Finals the 2 seasons prior to this really probably inflated the view of themselves and could be an issue. I think they have real issues with that lineup. I didn't even mention Devin Vassell. He still gave you 11 points. Carter Bryant is now playing instead of Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes even came in the fourth quarter when there were still starters playing, and you're just trying to put the game away. He was getting big rebounds. He had a big 3. And the depth of this lineup is so impressive. The modern NBA and what we've seen over the last 5, 6, 7 years is that depth is very, very important. We saw it with the Boston Celtics. We saw it with the Oklahoma City Thunder. We've seen it time and time again that teams with, one superstar player are not necessarily able to get over that hump. And, you look at a team like the Denver Nuggets. They've had Jokic play well in the playoffs, and they were only able to get to the NBA Finals that one time. The Milwaukee Bucks can't even make the playoffs with Giannis Antetokounmpo. So yes, Victor Wembanyama is probably the best player in the NBA, but the roster around him says so much. They shot the crap out of the three-point ball tonight. They shot 47% and hit 18 of them. And, if the Spurs are able to hit three-point shots at anything close to that clip, they're almost unbeatable. In fact, they probably are unbeatable. But they present so many matchup issues for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And when you look at, the Minnesota Timberwolves, they don't have really a real point guard playing out there. They do Mike Conley and Shannon Jr., who, Shannon Jr. was actually pretty impressive in this playoffs for what we expected. Ayo Dosunmu is a good player. Was coming off that knee injury. But when you aren't able to generate your offense at a high level with a point guard, I don't know how you score on this Spurs team with Wemby manning the defense. This team is elite on the offensive end of the court, elite at the defensive end of the court. And I just think it's going to be a really long time before this team is able to really be beaten in the Western Conference, unless it's by the Thunder, because the Thunder are very deep. I am picking the San Antonio Spurs over the Oklahoma City Thunder in the next round. I think that the matchup problems they create are very interesting. We saw in the first 2 rounds that Chet Holmgren was probably the best player for the Thunder. Shea's struggled so far in the playoffs. We've seen him really struggle kind of overall in the playoffs in the last couple seasons compared to what he does in the regular season. But they have so much depth and so much talent on the Thunder that they've been able to overcome that. Well, now they're running into a team with probably just as much depth, if not close, and a superstar player in Victor Wembanyama that the Thunder will have no answer for. Chet can't do anything with him, and we know that there's a rivalry there. It's fun to watch those 2 guys compete, and it should be a very fun series. But I think NBA fans and basketball fans as a whole that aren't Thunder fans are rooting so strongly for the San Antonio Spurs. If we can get a Victor Wembanyama Spurs finals against like the New York Knicks, that would be electric television. You're talking about a player that could go down as the greatest player of all time with the trajectory he's already on against New York Knicks, a team that, hasn't seen a lot of success in a long time, but, they rate really well. They have some talented players. That would just be electric to watch. But in this next series, the Spurs guards, if they're able to continue the way that they've been playing and step up at that level in the playoffs, and the moment's not too big for them, for Castle, for Harper. De'Aaron Fox doesn't have a lot of playoff experience before this season either. He had the one playoff series against Steph in the Warriors in Sacramento. It went to Game 7. Steph went crazy in that game. But De'Aaron Fox doesn't have a lot of experience. And all in all, the team doesn't have a ton of playoff run. But now they do. And we've seen them do it in big game sixes on the road against a good Minnesota Timberwolves team. So this series starts on Monday. I can't wait to watch it. The Thunder may win game one, but I think the Spurs are going to find a way to win this series because the NBA, it's hard to repeat, and the Spurs just feel like the team of destiny. This was the fastest paced series in the entire playoffs. The Spurs Timberwolves, and the Spurs are going to want to get out running against the Oklahoma City Thunder, be able to create mismatches going down the court. You don't want to let the Thunder get set in their half-court defense because they have so many really good defenders, and kind of dirty defender and Lou Dort, but all those guys are really good defenders for the Thunder. So if the Spurs can get out and running, get the Thunder out of position, they will be able to create mismatches. And when Wemby's in a mismatch, it feels like he can score every time. He had 19.6 rebounds, 3 blocks tonight, shot over 50% from the field. He didn't even have to do that much, and they scored almost 140. Think about that. We legitimately believe that Wemby is the best player in the NBA, and his team scored 140 on a night that he only took 11 shots. This Spurs team is legit. I think Mitch Johnson has done a great job. I don't know how Spurs fans feel about him, but as far as taking over a young basketball team, a team that has doesn't have the playoff experience, I think he's done an incredible job. The Spurs lost one game this series, and then another game where Wemby got ejected that they probably would have won. And in a previous round against the Trailblazers, Wemby went out with that concussion. I believe that's the game that they lost. They had a big lead. So the truly telling part is the games that the Timberwolves won in this series were very close, and the Spurs had 3 wins, I believe, of over 25 points. This series was not that close. And switching briefly to the Minnesota Timberwolves, they're in an interesting spot because you're paying a ton of money to Rudy Gobert. You have Anthony Edwards, who we know is a great player, but he's expensive. Julius Randle is expensive. He's giving you nothing in the playoffs. I hated that trade when they made it. I didn't understand it. Even if you wanted to get rid of Karl Anthony Towns, there had to be a way to get better value than Julius Randle. And tonight he had 3 points and was a minus 34 from the field. Rudy Gobert had 0 points. Wemby just absolutely took him out of the game. Anthony Edwards, 9 of 26. Naz Reid is a really good player, had 18 points. Dosunmu had 10. Jaden McDaniels had 13. This team doesn't have the horses to compete with the Thunder and Spurs. It is not close. They are not close to an NBA championship. You're easily, at least the third best team in the Western Conference. Could be fourth next season. We'll see what happens. And I just don't like the direction that this front office went. They traded all their chips to the table to get Rudy Gobert, and then they got rid of Karl Anthony Towns and brought in a guy in Julius Randle who historically has not been awesome in the playoffs. And now you have this young superstar in Anthony Edwards with really nothing around him. And at what point does Anthony Edwards get sick of that? The Timberwolves, I don't want to get too far into it right now, but they have not been a great organization. We saw Kevin Garnett be one of the best players in the NBA, win an MVP, and he couldn't really compete with this organization. So they haven't done a great job with roster building. They haven't done a great job with, contracts with their assets. So where do the Timberwolves go from here? It's a great question. We could dig into guys who are free agents. I believe Dosunmu's a free agent. I believe Mike Conley, he'll probably retire if I had to guess. But they're in a tough spot, and I don't think that they're going to be able to compete in the next few seasons until they really clean up their books or they get really lucky with, some draft pick that hits or, some free agent decides to come to Minnesota and really steps up, similar to how Jalen Brunson did for the Knicks. He kind of came underrated and on a cheaper contract and really elevated when he got there. That's kind of maybe their path forward, but they're in a tough spot. Impressive win tonight by the San Antonio Spurs. I can't wait to watch the rest of these playoffs. the conference finals between the Spurs and the Thunder, and we are getting Game 7 between Cavs, Pistons to play against the New York Knicks. There are 5 teams remaining in the playoffs, and we all pray that the Oklahoma City Thunder are not the team that take home the championship this season. That's all we got for you tonight. If you enjoy the NBA, make sure you take a second to subscribe to the channel. We're at almost 1,400 subscribers and grinding NBA content. Appreciate y'all watching. Cyborg out.